You are most welcome to this recorded version of a conflict sensitivity webinar focusing on the Do No Harm tool in humanitarian assistance. You are with us to listen to this webinar by the Swedish Mission Council, SMC, in close collaboration with the Swedish Fellowship of Reconciliation, SweFOR. The webinar was casted live on the 12th of October 2015. What you can follow here is a recorded and slightly edited version of the webinar. Once again, you are most welcome. Now over to the recording. Yes, I think we should start. My name is Niklas Eklov, and I work with capacity development at the SMC, and I will be your host during this webinar. The SMC is an umbrella organization in Sweden with 34 members that are engaged in international development issues. And since 2014, SMC has a frame agreement with the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA, to channel funds for humanitarian assistance to different crisis situations around the world through the member organizations in the humanitarian team. And I will be here with you, and you will be with us from different parts of the world. We have representatives from Sweden. We're still awaiting a few persons from South Sudan, India, Kenya, Uganda, and Bangladesh. So within this framework of the SMC humanitarian work, we have a lot of partners all over the place. So a bit short about this webinar. We will start by a presentation, and then we'll have a discussion. All in all, we hope it will not take more than 40-45 minutes in total. Everyone is okay that you can hear me, and we'll continue to the focus of today, and that is conflict sensitivity and the Do No Harm tool in humanitarian assistance. The SMC Humanitarian Cooperation, we have identified a need to learn more about conflict sensitivity, conflict context analysis, and planning in relation to humanitarian interventions. And we have specifically identified that we would like to know more about the Do No Harm tool. So the very concrete aim of this today's webinar is that you who are participating should be able to use the Do No Harm tool in order to strengthen conflict sensitivity analysis in your projects and programs. Maybe new to this, some have gone through trainings before, but we hope that it will be both an introduction and a refreshment for you. I'm very happy to welcome Mrs. Kari Berg from the Swedish Fellowship of Reconciliation, SweFOR, or Kristna Fredsrörelsen in Swedish, which is one of SMC's member organizations focusing on peace building and human security. In Do No Harm methodology, an advisor at SweFOR, where she's been working for the last 10 years. She will lead us through the content of this webinar. The webinar itself will address two main questions, and which will be the basis for both the presentation and the following discussion. The first one is, what is Do No Harm? And the second one is, how to do a Do No Harm analysis. Very much welcome. And so I think we just go straight forward to the first question. What is Do No Harm, and why was it developed?
Thank you, Niklas, and thank you, the SMC, for inviting me. Harm is an approach for conflict sensitivity, meaning it helps us assess the impact our interventions may have on conflict dynamics, and even more importantly, how to design or redesign our projects in order to increase positive impact and avoid negative impact. approach was developed in the 90s by CDA together with a number of international and local NGOs. They had seen that international assistance had caused unintended harm in many conflict situations, and through a great number of case studies and consultations, they emerged with a very clear outcome. A context becomes a part of the context. This means that as actors in humanitarian or development assistance, we all have to be very conscious about the positive or negative impact our interventions may have on the local conflict context. To summarize, conflict sensitivity implies an organization's ability to understand the context in which you operate, to understand the interaction between your intervention and the context, and acting upon the understanding of this interaction to avoid negative impacts and maximize positive impacts on conflict dynamics. Through a do no harm analysis, it is possible to handle the complexity of the conflict environment, making the conflict impact assessment manageable. Aid supports peace and not war.
Thank you. So the second question, Kari, how do we then do a do no harm analysis?
The do no harm approach helps you ensure conflict sensitivity in all stages of the project cycle. A traditional do no harm analysis is made in 6 steps. I will walk you through them. In order to learn the principles of the do no harm and to get familiar with its concepts, a model called the relationship framework, seen on the screen right now, is really helpful. So let's look into the do no harm relationship framework step by step. And then after this webinar, I recommend you to try to follow the steps, filling in the information from your context and intervention. I will present how to go about it, but it's when using the tools that the real learning starts. The first of the 6 steps is to understand the context of conflict. Start with an actor mapping. Who are the key actors in the conflict and what are their relationships? Also identify which intergroup conflicts have caused violence or are dangerous and may escalate into violence. Then look at the conflict issue and the dynamics of the conflict. What is the conflict about? The main mechanisms driving the conflict. That can be things like struggle for power, insecurity, etc. In the second step of the analysis, you identify and analyze dividers and tensions in the context. Dividers are those things or factors that increase tension between people or groups and may lead to destructive competition. What do we know about the tensions and the things that divide people? Make a list of tensions and dividers. Tensions and dividers can be, for example, ideological differences between groups, competition for scarce goods and resources, displacement, different groups living in separate villages, etc. What patterns can we see in these tensions dividers? For example, the tensions might be historically deep-seated, they might be a result of rather than a cause of war, etc. The third step is to identify and analyze connectors and local capacities for peace. Individuals or groups, although divided by conflict, can be connected across subgroup lines. Connectors are those things or factors that reduce tensions between people or groups and lead to and strengthen constructive collaboration. They can also be described as local capacities for peace. What kind of things connect people in the context, meaning connectors across conflict lines? Connectors might be things like schools and clinics, common religious practices, people from different groups living or working together, meeting places like local markets, a shared experience. Even the experience of war can provide a basis for linkage and connection among people on differing sides of a conflict. Any local capacities for peace, like for example, elders committees that are used in settling disputes. What patterns can we see? Do an analysis of the connectors and local capacities for peace. We have now analyzed the context. In order to see how our intervention impacts the context, we also have to analyze the intervention. In the fourth step, we turn to the project or intervention itself. Look at the critical details of your planned or existing project. Critical details are things like targeting, who are the direct and indirect beneficiaries, and who is not benefiting. What resources will be brought in? Provide. Where? In what areas will the intervention be implemented? Partners are involved. What is the role of local authority, for example? Staffing. How is staff selected? How are we planning to distribute our products and services? At this point, you have gathered information about the context and the project. The fifth step is to analyze the project's impact on the dividers and connectors. The Do No Harm project found that the most direct impact assistance interventions have on conflicts are a result of the introduction of resources. Resources are related to the actions of the intervention, what we do. Projects also have an impact through what our behavior communicates. Behavior is reflected in the conduct of the people bringing the resources, how we are doing it. Starting with actions, when an intervention enters a context, it brings resources, materials, employment, trainings, etc. The ways in which we transfer the resources have consequences. The Do No Harm has identified 5 ways our resources have an effect on the conflict. The intervention may be fueling the conflict with stolen or diverted goods. Market effects. Impact through changing local markets with an influx of outside goods. Distribution effects. Distributing goods signs of the conflict. There are many examples of programs targeting the needs of one group, risking to worsen division between conflicting groups. Substitution effects. Replacing existing functioning systems and structures. This provides a great risk of weakening connectors and local capacities for peace. Effects, giving legitimacy to a group or leader by working with them. But aid workers also send messages to communities through their behavior, as much as through their words. Positive patterns can build trust among communities. Negative patterns can undermine an organization's efforts and put their staff into danger. So, in this 5th step, you analyze the project's impact on the dividers and connectors. The project and the dividers. What dividers might be affected by the project? In what way could the assistance provided increase a divider or tension? Any possible positive impact, meaning that the project reduces tensions, divisions. How? Be seen on the connectors or local capacities for peace. Positive, negative. The last step of the do no harm analysis is to analyze possible options for implementing the project, and based on these findings to make decisions to redesign the project. So if we see that there is a risk that the project increases tensions, what options are there in terms of project design? What changes could be made in order not to increase the tension and to strengthen the local capacities for peace? According to the findings of the Do No Harm project, there are always alternatives, and the difference between worsening conflict and supporting local capacities for peace is all in the details. We have now gone through all the steps of the analysis. Let's do a short repetition of the 6 steps with examples from a case. So, step 1 was understanding the context of the conflict. In this case, a civil war caused by a struggle for leadership just ended. There are 2 main ethnic groups in the country, and during the war they were on opposite sides. At the end of the war, troops from one of the groups systematically destroyed houses of the other group, resulting in many IDPs, internally displaced people. But houses and buildings belonging to people of both groups were destroyed. When the project in this case starts, IDPs are returning. The second step, in this case, dividers and tensions are, for example, competition for scarce goods and resources, 2 distinct ethnic groups, of which 75% live in separate villages. In step 3, we're looking at connectors and local capacities for peace. And in this case, we find, for example, that institutions like schools and clinics are connectors. Another example is that there exist elders committees that settle housing disputes. Step 4, we look at the project. In our case, an agency have designed a project targeting returning IDPs. They want to rebuild destroyed houses. In order to do that, they designed a food for work project where people rebuild damaged houses and are paid in food supplies. Step 5 is about analyzing the project's impact on the dividers and connectors with a focus on actions, resources brought in, and behavior. So, with this brief information, what possible impact can we see? Is that the target group, meaning the groups that will receive the resources provided, coincide with the conflict line in the past violent conflict, risking to worsen a divider. Design the project is to include both ethnic groups in the targeting, for example, by including mixed villages and aim at creating mixed building teams. At the connectors, the project seems to have missed an opportunity to strengthen a connector in their choice to focus on rebuilding only private houses. Reconstruction of community-based buildings, they strengthen a connector. But I think you get the idea.
Thank you, Kari, for walking us through the framework. So I think we made it in almost 15 minutes or almost 20. Is it possible to do a good do no harm analysis in just like 15 minutes, or how much time do you need to invest in order to do a thorough analysis? What do you think?
Well, that depends on the conditions, I guess. Do no harm analysis will take longer, but practice makes it easier and faster. It also depends on the complexity of the conflict and the number of actors involved. I would say that spending 15 minutes regularly to update your analysis are minutes well spent. Once you are familiar with the 6 steps and the concepts of the do no harm approach, and for regular updates during the implementation of the intervention, you can simplify the analysis. There is an impressive amount of material on the CDA website. There's also a user's guide to the Do No Harm on the internet, a user's guide by Marshall Wallace. I think the important thing is to get started. Go for a good enough approach, as keeping things simple is a key to success. So use the concepts in your everyday discussions and analysis, and use the time that you have available. And also use your team. It's usually a good thing to work with this analysis in a workshop format.
Well, thank you. That's a great recommendation, and also sharing these good web links. All of you who are here will have this presentation sent, so that you will be able to look into these web links in a greater extent. So thank you so much, Kari, for this very valuable presentation. I think it was both a good introduction and a good refreshment for those who have gone through or are familiar with the Do No Harm approach since before. Use the rest of our time here for a bit of a discussion. As we mentioned at the start, you are free to post your questions in the TeamViewer chat function. We have understood from responses from a few of you that there have been difficulties to log in a bit, but we hope that you'll. But please be free to put any questions or comment. One comment from India, just for this webinar, and the partner here is making a few points about the challenges that the organization faces when they are involved in humanitarian response, and it's a bit of more of a comment. It's the context is very much a caste and religious context with politically based influences, so that affects the intervention. And they've also seen that what you mentioned, Kari, about effects on the local markets by the introduction of relief materials is a very key challenge. And, that this organization has a strategy. It seems like they are quite aware of these challenges that you mentioned. So they have tried to work with existing systems in the community and giving ownership to local authorities through participation. That's one strategy they've followed. Have, as an organization, a developed complaint handling mechanism, which makes the intervention more accountable and transparent. Comments from the community is made public and influences the intervention. Point of strategy this partner presents is that they try to procure materials locally as much as possible to both get culturally accepted food materials, you mentioned, and strengthening the local market as well. So that was a comment that we received from India. Do you have any comment to that, or thing that you would like to highlight?
Just to say thank you for sending in these examples of how you work, and that it's obvious that you've paid attention to connectors and dividers and the way that their actions and behaviors influences these. So excellent examples.
I think it's very, very good that to as much as possible strengthen the local actors and the local markets, and also the different in situations where there are different religious or political or caste, you really have that awareness. We have received a question here from Sweden, and I'll read it out loud. Suggestions on how to limit ourselves when doing the analysis. In, for example, the Middle East, or maybe in all contexts, there are many dividers and connectors, and there's a risk of getting lost in a far too extensive analysis that turns out rather impossible to act upon. So, Kari.
I can see the challenge. Well, the quick answer would be to, if possible, start locally, doing your analysis, and to be specific, to clarify what aspects of certain factors that divide or connect people. Juliana? The local, because I think on a regional level, it's probably difficult, but looking at the local contexts where your project is being implemented can be helpful. I would also add, just underline the importance of the rights-based approach, not to lose it, as you talked about the Middle East, and I know that you're in occupied territories, and where you have a lot of injustices, so connectors and dividers. It's really, when looking at connectors and dividers, you really need to hold tight to your rights-based approach.
Thank you. Yes, and I think another way to do it would be to look at different levels. Of course, the intervention as such, in many cases, are in the local situation at the local area, but some interventions have other kinds of targets, and therefore the analysis have to maybe be on more national or political level as well.
Another aspect is that if you're analyzing a context that's very complex, with multiple actors and several conflict lines, it's useful to do separate analysis. So it could be a good idea to do multiple lists of dividers and connectors. So you would use like this framework that I showed you several times instead of packing them.
We have also received another comment. Maybe that relates more to the comment from India, and it's about a suggestion to use cash-based support in food security interventions as a way to do no harm for local markets. I think that's a very valuable comment. Thank you. Do we have any more comments or questions, Claes-Johan?
We give you half a minute or...
Yes, maybe a bit more time, and I think maybe having listened to you, Kari, I try to reflect a bit on how this relates to the work that SMC is doing and the partnership within the humanitarian work. My first reflection is that in humanitarian crisis situations, time is usually a factor of constraint. You have to act fast, and there's little room for time-consuming context analysis. But we also know from humanitarian work that one of the keys for successful intervention is to be preparedness. And therefore, conflict sensitivity is so important that assistance meets the needs and makes good impact. And of course, avoids doing no harm. preparedness. It's about knowing the environment in which you work. It's about having contingency plans for emergency situations. It's about having systems, policies, and partnerships in place to guide rapid intervention. And it's also about having right human capacities to implement. So, conflict sensitivity tool, just like this do no harm, is a very good help for our humanitarian partners in order to be as prepared as possible before and during the implementation of a humanitarian intervention. Claes, when we have a picture of, maybe we could look at the humanitarian project cycle. There's a picture, and there where we could see that preparedness sounds like something that you need to be doing in advance, and that's true, but it's also having this awareness constantly about that the context could change, and having this deeper analysis of what drivers and connectors and dividers are there, so that we have to relate to that, and those power dynamics could change during a project cycle. So of course.
We have one more question.
Okay, let's have you checked that, Kari? And I'll just make my last comment here. When we talked about preparedness, there are of course limits on how much you can be prepared, but the awareness itself about this relationship between relief and conflict, that could save both money and lives. So that's why we as SMC have asked all those for conflict impact assessment to be included in applications for humanitarian assistance. Also why we wanted to do this webinar, as we believe that do no harm could be one of these tools that helps us to be more, and to help the interventions to be more conflict sensitive. I have a question here. Is there a difference between an analysis on conflict based on war than conflict based on crime?
A great question, and unfortunately, I think it's relevant to a lot of contexts. My answer would be yes, there is a difference, and that this tool is about analyzing violent conflict or war. Then I think there are mixed cases where criminal actors are quite linked to the state and also to a situation of violent conflict. So this is a question that's being developed, I think, and that is more and more relevant in the future. So I would say traditionally, yeah, crime would more relate to a risk security analysis. But I would say that there are situations where crime becomes part of the conflict setting. Yeah.
Did that help you with a question? Otherwise, we can continue through email. Yes, we got to thank you. Good. I was thinking, when we become very practical here, Kari, are there any pitfalls that you avoid when doing a do no harm analysis?
Yeah, I think a common one is to end up with a list of dividers and connectors where you find the same factor on both lists. But no single factor can be both a divider and a connector, but aspects of them can. So it's a question about disaggregating. In order to clarify what aspect of the factor that is dividing and what aspect that's connecting. So ask yourself, what aspect of this divide people, what aspects connect people? Yeah.
Okay. Have any more questions out there? I don't see any more questions or comments. Of course, know that many of these contexts are complex, very complex. And I think that the question that we got about the Middle East is how to analyze a situation with multiple actors and several conflict lines. Do you have any comments about that, Kari?
Sorry, I was reading a question.
Okay, we have another chat coming in. Great. I was wondering about this when you have contexts that are very complex with the multiple layers, multiple actors, and maybe several conflict lines. Do you have any recommendation on how to do that? It relates to the Middle East one a bit.
Yeah, I think making separate analysis for each conflict line is valuable. Otherwise, it might get mixed up. And then we have a follow-up question. If I could give examples of things that are both connectors and dividers. So I would be happy to try to give an example. Access to water. Lack of water might lead to competition over resources, but at the same time, it is a joint need, and a water well might be a potential meeting point. So if one would say water is a connector and a divider, I would say, what aspect of water? The lack of water could be a divider, but the need of access to water would be a connector. Another classical example might be religion. If you put religion on your list of dividers, it's good to look at if there are aspects of religion that might be a connector, and then to be specific about what aspect of religion is a divider, what aspect is a connector.
Okay, we have a comment here also. I'll read it. Sometimes the dividers are also possible connectors. For example, resources like cattle can cause conflicts, while they can also be used for solving conflicts. A very relevant comment. It only adds to what you said, Kari, about in the analysis and trying to these local capacities of peace, those and find the aspect of the problems that actually could be the sources of solving these problems. Any comments about that, Kari?
No, I really agree. That's a very good example of a factor that can be aspects of cattle can be a connector, and other aspects divider. So excellent. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I think it's time to round up here with a few final words. For any technical disturbances that we've had during the course, and for those of you who were not able to come in right away from the start, we say sorry, but we are happy that we are able to very shortly upload this on the SMC YouTube channel. And for all of those who also showed interest of joining this webinar, we'll send the presentation via email. I'm so happy, Kari, for you being with us today, and thank you so much for helping us to know how to use the Do No Harm tool in order to strengthen conflict sensitivity analysis in programs. And in our case, when we talk about the humanitarian assistance field, we feel that this is very relevant. So thank you so much for all the efforts that you put into this. We know that you have struggled many hours to try to understand a bit more the humanitarian field and the context that we're talking about. Thank you so much for all of you who have been part of this webinar online, and thank you for listening carefully and also for the contributions, for technical support, and for those of you who felt that those pictures slides were quite good. We thank UNDP in Nepal who have sent these for us, or letting us use these wonderful images. So thank you, and of course for the CDA for developing the do no harm approach and making this impressive amount of material available at their website. So please check this out on their website and log in as soon as possible. We'll let you know when on the SMC YouTube channel shortly. So, and the do no harm in humanitarian assistance. Don't forget to practice. All the best from us. Bye bye.
Bye bye.